Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 232, and here we are. Today is the day, September 7th, the total lunar eclipse that we've been preparing for here for over a year now. And wow, how time flies, right? I can't believe we're already in the month of September. It feels like this year has just completely zoomed by, probably one of the quickest years that I've experienced in this timeline. How do you guys feel? Definitely let me know in the Discord, in the general chat. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this. Feels like we're in a time warp. So now that we're here with this total lunar eclipse perfectly landing on a Sunday, of course, this being the day that I released my red pills, that makes it a no-brainer to dedicate today's podcast to the eclipse season Decoded, since it's not just today's eclipse that matters, it's actually the overall energy we'll be experiencing through next month's full moon on October 6th, with our partial solar eclipse in the middle on September 21st, leading into Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year. So that's what we're going to focus on here in today's Red Pill Podcast, Eclipse Season Decoded, so that you can be thoroughly prepared for the month ahead. Now, as you can imagine, we have a lot to cover in today's decode and plenty of charts to review, so let's get straight into it. But as always, before we get started, make sure to get relaxed. Get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer, or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. And also, please make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill Podcast. But before you leave a comment, just make sure that you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered the project in at least 3 months. So if it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never reviewed that altcoin before, as long as it has at least one total year of chart history here on TradingView, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 will be selected for next week's Red Pill. And what you probably noticed lately is that I've been including at least one new project every single week that I've never covered before. And that'll be a theme that we'll continue to stick to. We've been actually doing it for about 5 months now. So it's been really cool to make sure that we at least check out one new altcoin every week, and we're going to stick to that theme. This week, we will also have another new submission that I've never looked at before. We'll get to that later in today's podcast, of course. All right. So first things first, it's important that we revisit what I'm considering, and probably you all agree as well, the most significant time frame of this year, which was, of course, early April, immediately following our last eclipse season in March. And as most of you are aware, in early April, we had Trump's Liberation Day on April 2nd, and then the entire market went on to bottom in sync on April 7th. So effectively, the entire market, including cryptocurrency, crashed into April 7th, and April 7th was a pivot date where pretty much everything bottomed on that date. And April 7th was definitely symbolic for this year because it was the 4-7 date, the 47 code, and the market crash was exoterically triggered by Donald Trump, the 47th president of the United States, again with this 47 code. The number 47 is the 15th prime number, and we had April 7th, this date that we're discussing. It was the 15th week of the year. It was the start of the 15th week of the year. And what makes this decode even more powerful is the fact that April 7th was the 97th day of this year. And we're also in the year of the snake, as you can see over here, from January 29th, 2025 through February 16th, 2026, which also will be a total solar eclipse, or an annular solar eclipse, actually. So keep that in mind. But we're in the year of the snake, and the snake is the serpent, and we have the serpent equals 97. As I was just showing you a moment ago, April 7th is the 97th day of the year. And this 97 connection comes full circle to what we're focusing on here in our podcasts, which of course is crypto. And we have crypto giving you 90 97 in English ordinal in the main English cipher. Now, to take it even further, 97 is the 25th prime number. And we're going to start to get a little deeper into this. This might be something you've heard a couple times, but I just want to revisit this because I believe it provides a lot of foundation for the rest of today's decode. And of course, pretty much all of our decodes for the year. So we have this 97 connection. The market crashed into the 97th day of the year. 97 is the 25th prime number. You could even see crypto in Chaldean cipher gives you 25. But what I actually wanted to bring up is the fact that this connection to our year in the Gregorian system of 25, we would shorten this year of 2025 and just call it 25. And the exoteric Hebrew year, which is, I'm just using this term exoteric Hebrew year because I've had some people come to me saying that, it's not the actual Hebrew year that they're telling us. Guys, I get it. All of this stuff is make-believe anyways. The masses have to deal with the systems that the elite give us. If you go to do your tax return and you found out from some decoder that we're not actually in the year of 2025 and you were to write a different year, like the year 5800, good luck with that. It's just something we have to deal with. So as decoders, especially, I'll just speak for myself as a decoder, it's up to me to take what is exoteric and what is believed by the masses, what is spellcasting the masses, for example, decode that to get what is esoteric. And then in the meantime, of course, I could come to my own conclusions and opinions about what the real year is or what the real month is, but ultimately that doesn't matter. I've even created my own esoteric numerology system, and I was born in March, for instance, and my decoding system says March is the first month. But if I went ahead and wrote that on a flight ticket that I was booking, it would be inaccurate for my passport, and then I won't be able to get on that flight. So you kind of just have to deal with what it is. You feel me? And I hope that helps people. So anyways, not to put in a bunch of word salad here, but I'm going to start saying exoteric Hebrew year for those people that I guess need that, insurance. So we have the exoteric Hebrew year of 5,785, which we're still in, and that adds up to 25, coming full circle to this Gregorian year of 25 and all the other 25 connections that we're making, like the crash date being the 97th day of the year, which is the 25th prime number. Apologies. Right there. So this is perfectly matching our year and all of these numbers to the Gregorian system, Chinese, and the Hebrew calendar, and we're just getting started. So this is all pointing to the significant date of April 7th, as we were starting today's decode with, which again, 97th day of the year. 97 is the 25th prime number. So now I want us to focus on this 25 code for a moment, because today, September 7th, you can see it's the 9/7 date. So you have that number 97. As you're aware, it's tied to the 25. And that's not all, because today also happens to be the 250th day of the year. You drop that 0 in the rules of numerology, and you have the 25 code. Also, today has a 25 date numerology. This would be your standard date numerology, 25, before reduction. So we have all these 25 connections for this particular day, and we're connecting it to one of the most significant days of the year for us market participants, April 7th. So, of course, back then on April 7th, we saw the market bottoming after a dramatic crash. And here we are in crypto recently experiencing an almost month-long correction perfectly into this lunar eclipse here today. As we have the traditional markets at all-time highs, gold has recently pushed deeper into price discovery as well, closing off the week at yet another new all-time high, which we'll cover a little bit later. And then we even have the Russell 2000. It's broken out higher into this recent weekly close. We'll also cover that a little bit later today. And now we're about 10 days out from the Federal Reserve FOMC meeting on the 17th. And the market is expecting rate cuts after this almost year-long cage match between Trump and Fed Chair Powell. To me, after considering all of these elements, this made me want to look deeper into how April is connected to this September. And here we are, kicking off eclipse season with a key connection, which is April 7th, the start of the 15th week of the year. And to this date will be 15 Sorry, will be 22 weeks apart. Now, I was going to say this 5-1 code, but I want to focus on the most important part of this. Save your time. We're about 10 minutes deep into this podcast. Lots of alpha already. This 22 code is so important for us. And for those of you that are aware, 22 is symbolic. It's a master number. It's the master builder and the master destroyer number. Now, I want to quickly show you in the Bitcoin chart the significance of this number 22, specifically since this month of April, right over here, had a market crash bottom, and we've pivoted and headed higher since, deeper into price discovery. So we're looking at the Bitcoin chart right now, and we're tracking everything after this April crash, and the first 22 connection we have is right here, April 22nd. If you look to the left, you'll see that since the market started crashing, April 22nd was effectively the pivot date. It's where you'll see the Bitcoin breakout above local resistance, and then it actually started to show confirmations of recovery, which then leads us to our next 22 connection, which was the local top on May 22nd, right here. So we have the 22nd day of the following month, a significant date, because if you look at the time, we actually topped there until we broke out again in July. Now, what's amazing about this is May 22nd was right leading into the 22nd week of this year. I'll show you right over here. So you have over here, May 22nd was within the 21st week of the year, heading into the 22nd week of the year, which then we had the market do a little bit of a transition and we went into a bearish energy. So we had the 22nd, we had a very bullish confirmation, breakout higher into the next 22nd day of the month, followed by a 22nd week of the year correction. And then look at what happens next. We have this correction down into, guess what date? June 22nd, the 22nd day of the following month, where we perfectly bottomed on that exact date, and then we recovered into the following month. Or guess what happened? That's right, on July 22nd, the following month, Bitcoin closed its highest daily candle close at the time, 120K. You can't make this up. Oh, and if you really want your mind blown, look at the candle on August 22nd, which was right over here. So we're looking at this green candle, the 22nd day of last month. Doesn't seem so significant, but let me show you why it is. We can see that Bitcoin closed the daily. If you look right there, right now, you'll see it was up $4,400. That's the 44 code, which is 22 two times. 22 plus 22 is 44. And this was actually the biggest green daily candle close that we've had for Bitcoin since July 10th. So let me just show you here. We're going to type in July 10th. And we're going to type in August 22nd, last month. And including the end date you have, they are 44 days apart. So 44 days after the next biggest green candle close we've had from July 10th happens to be the day that we also go up $4,400 44 days later. All tied back to the 22 code, 22 times 2, 44. So this is absolutely wild. And before we move forward, for those who are aware of my esoteric numerology blueprint and calculator, I brought it up a moment ago, this is actually included for all the members of Waters Above University. You'll know that system considers March as the first month, naturally making April the second month. So this means that Trump's Liberation Day was actually on 2/2, second month in the esoteric system, second day. The 22 code, coming back to the number 22, the master builder, the master destroyer number. This was obviously a very significant date because it's what led to the market bottom on 4/7, the day that is tied to Trump. But getting back to this, so now that I've shown you here in the chart the undeniable power of the number 22 for Bitcoin, and obviously Bitcoin is what's moving all of the other altcoins for the most part. Then, of course, we can shift our attention to the upcoming date of September 22nd. And I believe this will be a very significant date for this year, not only because we've had a theme of the number 22 for each day of the month, but also because this will be the start of Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year, as you can see right here for 2025, 22nd day of September. So let me quickly show you why this is so important also, because when we go to 9/22, September 22nd, you'll see that it is a 22 standard date numerology. So the date numerology is a master number. You would not reduce that. That is what it is. And what I believe might be the most important connection of all is the fact that if you measure from the esoteric date of April 2nd, and you go over to the actual date of Rosh Hashanah, the key date. So we have Trump's Liberation Day. Then we have the main day of Rosh Hashanah in the Gregorian system. This would be considered the main date. Including the end date, they are 25 weeks apart. So it's coming back to that 25 code that we were talking about. And that's, of course, the main code of our year, 25. Remember how April 7th, I was showing you that's the 97th day of the year. 97 is the 25th prime number. Well, the 25th day of September also happens to be the day leaving 97 days left in the year, another 25 connection, and it will also be the 25th day of September with a 25 standard date numerology, and it is 25 weeks and 2 days from Trump's Liberation Day. That is the palindrome of the number 25. You have 25 forwards and backwards. There is so many 25 connections here just between these two dates. It's mind-blowing. And the day after, September 26th, just something to bring up, it will actually be 250 days since Trump's inauguration, which was on the 20th of January. That 250 code, but to keep it crypto related, we can actually still consider January 19th, that Sunday, because that would be the day where both Donald Trump and his wife Melania launched meme coins on the Solana blockchain. And that, of course, momentarily marked the top for the entire crypto market at the time. So that was an insanely significant date leading up to the quote unquote crypto president's inauguration, launching a meme coin within 24 hours of his inauguration, which both have been pretty devastating losses since the launch. I should actually look into this. Trump, I want to see where it's at. Be interesting. No offense to anybody with this stuff. I don't really care. Oof, yeah. Okay, so that's Trump's inauguration, that little circle over there. And you can see where we are now, still kind of in price discovery to the downside. This has come back to launch price from January. You can see January 19th is up over here. So this was the date of launch, effectively. Fascinating. So, yeah, here we are. This was clearly a trap at the time. I talked about how it was a trap. I actually kind of was very neutral at the time where that was being launched. Everyone could go back to that red pill because it was happening on the date of a red pill release. And I was telling people, I think this is a very dangerous thing because retail who are supporters of Donald Trump who don't know much about crypto, they can get sucked into this thing, and that could be a very bad ending in general. But anyways, it is what it is. Here we are today. We can see how that all went down, and Bitcoin has only just went higher from January 20th. It's actually not so much higher, but generally it hasn't had to experience such a devastating loss. So even the people who are jumping in thinking that this was a good enough correction to buy, it's down still 70%. So this is a full bear market in crypto. When you see something losing 80% of its value from a major peak, which this is up till today, lost 88%, this is like typically what an altcoin bear market is. And it only went through all of this because of the launch. It was a coordinated attack on retail. It always is. But all right, truly getting back to this. This is such an amazing connection, in my opinion, between January 19th and this date right here of September 25th, because we have the 25, we have the 25, 97 is the 25th prime, and these dates are 250 days apart, another 25 connection. So this Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year, will be pivotal. It's clear in the code. And finally, the last connection to Trump for this month of September would be measuring from the date he won this selection on the 5th of November last year and measuring it up to the date of the 29th of September. So still within the month of September and still going to be affected by eclipse season. You could bet on that. It's typically up until the following moon that we're out of eclipse season. So if we have a partial eclipse on the 21st, until the next full moon is kind of what we're dealing with the energetics still tied to this eclipse season. Think of it like a ripple effect where you have the moons that come before it and the pair of moons that come after it are still involved in how the energetics overall of eclipse season will be, because the eclipse season will be the middle point where the water droplet hits initially. So you could look at it like a ripple. I hope that helps people with the visuals of how they could perceive all of this. It would be like if we had eclipse season here in March, then everything that happened in February, you can see this is February 1st. Look at where we were trading at. Then we have the eclipses right over here. Then we have the month after. And then we have the pivot. So this is why you have to consider it's not just about eclipse season in and of itself. It's the month before it, month after it, if I just wanted to simplify everything. So obviously we know the month after will be October. And that's why in the last red pill, I put emphasis on that month. Getting back to this, the final connection here we have from November 5th, the day that Trump won the selection, over to whether you want to call it September 29th or you want to call it September 30th, including the end date or not. They are 47 weeks apart. And he is the 47th president. And I believe that's a huge connection to consider as well. Now, getting back to what the majority of the market participants will be focused on for this month, which is, of course, the upcoming FOMC meeting on September 17th. And there's also a notable connection for this date, which is the fact that it's the day leaving 105 days left in the year. Removing the 0, you have your 15 code. Remember earlier I talked about April 7th of this year. 47 is the 15th prime number, and April 7th started the 15th week of the year. So 15 is equally significant for all of our decodes this year. And a big reason I'm even entertaining these connections for this particular FOMC date is because we can also connect this date of September 17th back to Trump's Liberation Day. Yet another connection to Trump's Liberation Day. Because not including the end date, you'll see they're 5 months and 15 days apart. So you have that 15 code again. Also, you have the fact that Liberation Day was a 15 standard date numerology. And the mirror of the number 15 is 51. The double digit date numerology is 51 for Liberation Day. And these two dates are 5 months and 15 days apart. The palindrome of that number, 51. Bringing gematria into the equation, we have liberation, giving you this 51 code as well as the 105, comes full circle. Now, I want to wrap up today's decode with something I believe is absolutely mind-blowing, and it's tied to Jerome Powell, the current chairman of the Federal Reserve, as most of you know, because we've been talking about this guy nonstop here. Well, not me, but most of the people who talk about the markets have been talking about this man nonstop since the C19 crash. Pretty much right after the C19 crash, this guy became the talk of the town every single month since 2020. So it's been 5 years. Most exoteric analysts, most of the people that are just doing traditional TA or talking about markets, they only care about him and what he's up to. So I would like to wrap up today's decode with something that I believe is going to reveal some additional layers onto what we're about to see happen for this month of September and the why behind it. Why would the market maker, the apex predator, why would they make this ritual happen in this time frame? Well, let's go through it. So we have Jerome Powell was born in 1953. 1953 was the year of the snake. As you're aware, we're here in 2025. That is also the year of the snake. But although most of the Gregorian year of 1953 was in fact the year of the snake. It's important to mention that technically Jerome Powell wasn't born in the snake year, since his birthday was February 4th, and the Chinese New Year was 10 days later on February 14th. So I wanted to address that before someone in the comments says he was born in the year of the dragon. Yes, he was. But the point is, a majority of the first year of his life in this simulacrum was in the year of the snake. So this is kind of like the difference between having a tropical astrology birthday that is slightly off when you learn about sidereal, and then your sign changes. And you're like, oh my God, I thought I was a Aquarius or whatever. And then you find out in sidereal you're a different sign because it's just slightly off in the dates. For example, you can go over here and see the differences. And you associate it with that your whole life. And then you learn this other system. This is going to complicate things because they're not using in the Chinese system the Gregorian calendar. They're using their own system, just like in Hebrew they do as well. So here we're just trying to take everything and combine it together to get the best quality decodes possible and to get a deeper understanding of why these events happen the way they do, why certain people are coded into being important at certain times. Right? So getting back to this, 99.5% of Chairman Jerome Powell's first year in this simulacrum was in the snake year, not a dragon year. So I believe this is very important to point out. Now, let's fast forward to the year of 2018. He becomes the 16th chair of the Federal Reserve. Just look at this connection right here between 16, because 1 plus 6 equals 7. That's going to be a code for us to consider. So also interestingly, the day after his 65th birthday, he became the chairman of the Federal Reserve on February 5th, 2018. Now February 5th, 2-5, exoteric date, 2 plus 5 equals 7. 1 plus 6, 7. And you'll need to keep this theme of sevens in mind for the rest of this decode, because remember, we're here in the year 2025. 2 plus 5 is 7. He became the Fed chair on 2-5 date. Now let's fast forward again to 2025. We're going to be typing in 2-5 over here for 2018. And we're going to come over here to September 7th, 2025, and you'll see that he's been the Fed chair for 7 years. And not only 7 years, but this past Thursday on September 4th, he's been the Fed chair for 7 years and 7 months. And next Friday, September 12th, he'll be the Fed chair for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. 7 plus 7 plus 7 equals 21. That's the jackpot code. And that will be a 21 standard date numerology on that exact date, leading into the week that's the most important week for him and the markets. So he'll be the Fed chair for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days on the day of the weekly close, Friday, for the traditional markets, heading into the week where we'll have an all eyes on the market event with the FOMC meeting, where that actually translates to an all eyes on Jerome Powell's speech. Because that's all that matters. Or at least that's what they're telling us is all that matters. But we're going into the esoterica here. We're decoding it. So we have this next FOMC on the 17th day of this month. 17 is the 7th prime number. And again, returning back to the esoteric numerology calculator, or my system that I'm working with, September is actually the 7th month in the system because the prefix septem in Latin means 7. Most of you know this already. And we already have all of these 7 connections for Jerome Powell. And here we are on the 7th code of the true 7th month. We also have today being the 7th day of the 7th month, September 7th. And we have this total lunar eclipse with the FOMC meeting perfectly placed right in the middle of this eclipse season, with the partial lunar eclipse on September 21st. Again, 21 is esoterically 3 sevens. 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 21. The FOMC is on the 17th. 17th is the 7th prime number. How many more sevens do you need? Well, let's keep going. And today we have the seventh day of the seventh month, as I brought up before, and Jerome Powell has been the Fed chair for 7 years and 7 months leading up to this moment. His full name, which is Jerome Hayden Powell, also will give you 77 in Chaldean, in Gematria. This couldn't be any more perfect because in English Ordinal, the main English cipher, his name is 206. Now I'm going to show you a couple other final connections and then we'll be getting into the charts. But this 206 code is everything for the year we're moving into, 2026. You remove the 0, you have 26. And the day of the upcoming FOMC will be the 260th day of the year, the 26 code. It will also be the 26 standard date numerology. This adds another layer to the code, synchronizing it all together for Jerome Powell and rate cuts, which in Gematria gives you 26 in full reduction. Now consider if the number 25 is the key number for this year here in 2025, the year of the snake, which aligns with Jerome Powell as well in his birth year. That means that naturally 26 is the code for next year, and we'll get this 26 code very soon with the Hebrew year when Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year, has come and gone on sundown of September 24th, technically in the Gregorian system. That's when we would really consider it. This would be the Hebrew date of Tishri 2 into Tishri 3, but technically September 23rd, which aligns with the beginning of the month of Tishri in the Hebrew calendar. That's when this 26 code would come into play because it would be the year 5786, adds up to 26. We're talking about rate cuts, which I just showed you, gives you the 26 in Gematria on the day of Fed Chair Powell's speech, which will be a 26 date numerology and the 260th day of the year. So this is, of course, why I'm entertaining this 26 code for the upcoming FOMC and the exhausting talk of rate cuts that we've been hearing about all year. There it is, family. You can see this is all coded in. And as I've mentioned many times, as long as we've yet to have Bitcoin dominance drop to any extreme lows below 45%, until then, I'm looking at this eclipse season we've entered into as a pivot time frame, just like we've been experiencing since November 2022. And I could just show you with the chart that we started off today's podcast with right here, where so far Bitcoin has been pushing higher and higher and higher and higher on every eclipse season since the end of the bear market. So we can go all the way back to Bitcoin at 15K on the day of a total lunar eclipse, by the way, which today is too. And we can see the pivots accordingly, where we hit an eclipse, stall out, hit an eclipse, push higher, hit an eclipse, stall out, hit an eclipse, push higher, hit an eclipse. You see, it's a theme. And there's been a 600% rise in the Bitcoin price since the end of our last lunar cycle. So now that we've concluded today's decode, we should of course address the fact that so far Bitcoin has actually never pushed higher past the second lunar eclipse of a lunar cycle, without experiencing a full bear market first. Let me just quickly say that again to not confuse anyone. So far in the history of Bitcoin, Bitcoin has never pushed higher than the second lunar eclipse of a lunar cycle without at least experiencing a full bear market first. So that should be crystal clear. We have, though, and I've also said this many, many times, and I even put emphasis on it in my crypto decoding blueprint that I released last year in June 2024. I mentioned how in our last cycle, which you're seeing over here to the left, that was our first cycle ever where we saw Bitcoin push higher past the start of a lunar cycle. So into this red box, we technically did make a new all-time high. And in our last cycle that ended in 2021, we pushed up perfectly into the second lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, just like we did here in this cycle, so far topping out very close to our second lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, the same as the last cycle. But the big difference is in the last cycle, we actually already experienced an alt season before all of this. actually at least an alt season like we did back in 2017 and 2013 as well. So we achieved a full-blown alt season before having this 56% correction and double top into the Eclipse. And that alt season that we had was pretty much from the fourth solar eclipse of the solar cycle through this moment right here in April. It's kind of making me think, are we about to repeat something similar? Because when you look at the Ethereum chart back here and where Bitcoin was trading at around here, they were much more synchronized with where we are today. So it's natural to expect that as Bitcoin's market cap grows higher, that we will get an extension, at least in a way, of the way the overall cycle plays out. But Bitcoin is still in that 4-year cycle until proven otherwise. And when we're talking about alt seasons and that milestone, we had it back in 2021, all throughout here. We had it in 2017 in the same time frame, and we had it in 2013. And as you're aware, those 3 years that I listed, what they all have in common is they're 4 years apart. And now we're here in 2025, 4 years since 2021. And in 2021, Bitcoin topped around the November new moon. Here in 2018, Bitcoin topped around the December new moon. And in 2013, Bitcoin topped around the December new moon. Which is why I'm now entertaining the same thing happening this cycle for November through December's new moon, which would be November 20th through December 19th. This should not be news to anyone. I've been talking about it pretty much nonstop since May of this year. So why I'm now entertaining this happening is because we've yet to have Bitcoin dominance fully drop down to the levels that we typically see when a true cycle peak is said and done. And also the fact that Bitcoin has been maintaining structure. I mean, Bitcoin could even drop down to 70 or 80. It could drop down to 80K technically. And it wouldn't even be in a bear market based on what we've seen in past cycles. Where you can see over here, it took this devastating drop followed by a bull trap and a deeper drop for us to really call it the end. And that was around the third lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle. So this is why I'm putting emphasis on March 2026, that it might be the true end. And if you look at the timing of it all, this could actually make a lot of sense when mimicking the way that we moved up one eclipse deeper. We could literally be seeing that happen for December and January for the alts. And that would be mimicking what happened in 2017 to 2018. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. I'm just sharing some thoughts on how this can play out because of the fact that we have this market in this weird environment where Bitcoin is just pushing higher and higher and higher every eclipse, but we're seeing these altcoins still struggle. It's up until quite recently where we saw Ethereum hit a slightly new all-time high, and we've seen Binance coin slightly, actually technically breaking out into price discovery, even things like Tron, right? And Solana looking very strong. Now it's all balancing out. And these are kind of the moments that we're in when it's very confusing for altcoin holders. So let me just wrap this up real quick and then we'll get into the charts. I am looking at this October full moon on October 6th when we're fully out of this eclipse season energy. That's when the momentum for our quote unquote bull run should really pick up again. Since typically the first set of moons after eclipse season is an energetic reset, and based on seasonality, we also have Bitcoin looking very good in the months of October and November. It's two of the 3 best performing months for Bitcoin, so that aligns well, especially since Bitcoin dominance is yet to really drop to levels we typically see at the end stage of this cycle. And now, up to now, the drop we have seen in Bitcoin dominance is showing mostly only in the Ethereum and Binance coin charts, which is also exactly what we saw in the last cycle at the end of 2020 pushing into 2021, which was before the last true alt season kicked off. So that means, in plain English, we are very, very close, and we just have to make it through this eclipse season here in September, which officially kicked off here today on September 7th, perfectly aligning with today's red pill. Now let's get into these charts and review the setup into the week ahead as well as our upcoming weekly close later today, starting with the gold chart since it's officially pushed further into price discovery and we're seeing this new all-time high during this exact month of September, where we normally see a pattern that's played out and a pattern that we've been tracking here lately for gold and all of our past alt seasons combined. I would love to revisit this, and I think it's going to be very helpful to see, to just paint a better picture, a clearer picture of where things are at, all things considered. So we're looking at the gold chart right now. We're going to turn on the drawings. Mamma mia, we had yet another breakout and finally a push higher, leaving quite a gap in this past week, straight into Eclipse season. Kind of interesting having gold push perfectly into a new all-time high on the day of the week of a solar eclipse. Or, excuse me, lunar eclipse, apologies. That is definitely symbolic too. We'll touch on that perhaps in a future red pill. I don't want to spend too much time on the decoding now that we've made it into the charts, but here we are. And now it's the perfect time to just quickly review the past 3 examples of when we've seen something like this happen. And we've also anticipated this move, push higher for gold, and we're getting it. I'm not sure where the exact levels were that I said. I cover a lot of different charts all the time, but I still see gold has much higher to go. In the short term, though, this move into September was something that we were definitely prepared for. So here we are. We're at $3,600 USD per ounce on gold. Let's go backwards. And we have right here, August 7th, we have a major top in gold, quite a massive move up, followed by a correction all the way into the month of March the following year. And when this official top came in, and whilst gold was having this 19% correction from August 2020 through April 2021, Bitcoin gained 400%, and we had an alt season. Now, this move that we're getting right here, this exaggerated move up, could very well be what we're getting right now in the current gold chart, where we're on the final impulse up, and it will end in this month of September. And we could have some evidence why as we review the next time this happened, which is right over here. We have September 8th. That would be tomorrow. We have gold having a major move up, followed by a 9% correction from September through December 2017. But during this time, we had Bitcoin gain 300% plus an alt season. And then we have over here, we have this move also right there into the end of August. Such similar seasonality here with this move. And we also, like the last example, corrected into the month of December. Whilst gold was having a 15% correction during that time, Bitcoin gained 840%. And for the few altcoins that were around back then, we had our first true alt season during this move on gold. So we're getting this major move up on gold right now into this exact same time frame that we've seen it happen before, while Bitcoin was already looking good structurally, and it's the same setup. So I'm anticipating that to be the case as well. But by the way, this doesn't mean that gold has to just keel over and go down for Bitcoin to have more price discovery. We can see gold continue up as well. This is just the pattern that we've been seeing, where in every Bitcoin new all-time high in every alt season, gold is also looking really damn good, but then out of nowhere it pauses, and then we have everything goes super risk on, right? Where gold is like quote unquote boring for the market participants, and they start just YOLOing into random, speculative assets, which gold is not. So this is kind of the environment that we're in, where we've been seeing gold just push higher and higher and higher and higher all the way since the start of the year. I mean, what is gold up on the year? It's pretty incredible to see. Taking from around this $2,600 level, I mean, gold is up 35% already. That's insane for gold. So we're getting a little overheated in my opinion. And again, I still think we have much higher to go in the long term, but for now, this wouldn't shock me if we're about to see a momentary pause in gold, probably around the upcoming FOMC meeting, and that's going to make everyone super risk on, and then we're going to see crypto and all these other tech stocks balance out, pivot up in the month of October. That's my opinion. Now we can start to see we can get a taste of what I'm explaining to you right now by looking at the Russell, which has just effectively broken above the 888 fib, and now it's back into a range that it hasn't spent too much time in, because every time we get into this territory of around 2,400 points on the Russell, we have kind of a blow off top, which we see back in November 2021, the same time Bitcoin hit an all-time high. And also we see this over here in November 2024, also when everything was quite bullish at the end of last year. And then we have this crazy crash into April, followed by a V-shaped recovery, which is now pretty much fully recovered. So this Russell pushing up into price discovery, breaking above this 2,460 level, would be a true sign and a confirmation of get ready to see altcoins do some crazy shit. This is pretty much the signal, and we have here 2 clean rejections, 3 times the charm. So this would align really nicely with after this alt season, after this eclipse season. I would suspect that it could happen still in this month of September. It would be triggered by all of this FOMC stuff, but remember, typically these things are like a sell the news. So we have quite a bit ahead of us, like a full week or so of pushing up higher potentially to just trap a lot of people into the FOMC. And then, as I told you before, we can have a little bit of a sell-off after the FOMC because, again, it just gets overheated. It's a lot of tension on the markets. And then it's after that little correction that we get for Rosh Hashanah, for example, that we keep pushing higher. And this will all start to balance out again after this October full moon. So whatever the hell we're going to do between now and October and 1 month from today, because today's September 7th, October 6th is exactly a month away. Whatever we do in the midst of all of that, it will be likely feeling very bullish, like a bullish setup, but it will have its own confusion. It'll have its own, like times where what is going on, it's a lot more of the same generally, because there's no full-blown clarity until we get the rate cut decision. That's what the market wants. But the market maker loves to play with everybody, like the way the cat plays with the mouse. So if everyone is thinking one thing, the market maker does the other thing. This is just how it goes. The only way I would see it being maybe a little bit different is the way the FOMC meeting went on November 6th, I think it was, of 2024 last year. A lot of you remember this, and maybe you can share your opinion in the comments if you like. But right here on November 6th, we had an FOMC meeting, which from that moment, the market just went up in a straight line. Now remember, the election results came in technically on November 6th because November 5th was the election. And then after midnight, we started to hear like confirmations that Donald Trump will become the next president. So there was a combo between Trump, exoteric news, and then also the stuff going on with the FOMC. And the market's just sent up for several weeks, but you see this correction that we had into that moment. We could actually have something like this happen where we have a very bullish move up into the FOMC followed by a little bit of a sell-off. We have a bullish move up right before the FOMC, sell off into the FOMC, and then we push up higher, finishing off this month of September looking very good. And then just a little bit of chop around the final days of the month. That sort of set up like the exact end of October moving into November, where the eclipse was like just a major pivot overall. Let me show you. We had over here, you can see on October 3rd, that was an eclipse and it was a pivot. And right when we pushed through that eclipse season, we got expansion. We saw the same thing happen over here in October 2023 as well. We have a lot of chop leading into the eclipse, and then after the eclipse, there was expansion. That could be something to consider as well. So I am generally, again, still bullish until otherwise. Now, we've went over the gold chart, the setup into this month of September, how it's very cyclical. We went over the Russell and how we've pushed up higher, and the odds of price discovery are likely, especially with the rate cuts coming in. Let's now look at Bitcoin and just see what the setup is as we've now come back to this major trend line. And you'll see that every time Bitcoin returns back to this major trend line, we do chop quite a bit, but ultimately we've just been pushing higher and higher after retesting it. Here we had quite a nasty move below it, but it's not the first. Here on the August new moon flash crash of 2024 last year, we flashed below it, got back above it, and then retested it one last time. Very nice W breakout into this expansion after Eclipse season. So funny how we keep coming back to this trend line every Eclipse season. Like, it's unbelievable. Every Eclipse season we're trading around this major trend line. Here was the Eclipse, by the way, the start of the trend line. This is no different. And higher lows, higher high structure. So until I see Bitcoin monthly RSI get to somewhere that's like absolutely just like ridiculous, I am not ready for the end of Bitcoin's cycle. I think it would be very awkward for us to see such a weird, well, again, people can say that's just my opinion or whatever, and of course it is. But when we look at the past cycles, we see euphoria, we see greed, we see very overbought RSIs. We haven't seen that yet on Bitcoin, in my opinion. So we can take that for what it is, but I'm just seeing a setup the same as we saw at the end of 2020 moving into 2021. And I remember the end of 2020 was super confusing for investors. It was the same energy, just balanced like at that 50-50 level of like, what are we going to do? Make or break, pretty much right over here. We had made it to October 2020 and we had this huge correction into September and everyone was freaking out like what's going to happen. And then once we got through October, everybody's like, oh yeah, bull run's on. And then we had this V-shaped flash crash over here. And right after we went through that reset, Ethereum was just catching up. Ethereum wasn't even at all-time highs yet. And then this move up here, January 8th, 30% correction. All of this was the initiation into alt season. I think we're close to that move. That'll be that final move I'm suspecting will align with Mercury retrograde, the next Mercury retrograde. So the Bitcoin chart looking precarious right now, of course, if you're solely isolating it out to a trend line. But let's look at some of our moving averages. Let's turn off some of the drawings and see where we're at. So first things first, we have officially had a wolf cross, which is this 55 below. Sorry, we have the 8 crossing below the 55. Sorry if it's a little messy. This is not great to see, but we've seen this happen so many times and recovery after. This can be something momentary. It's when you start seeing it on like a weekly that's really not good. So we haven't seen a weekly wolf cross where the 8 goes below the 55 SMA since, well, the bull market started. And every deep correction we've had has been a backtest, of the 55 simple moving average. So that's really nice to see as well. Until we start closing weeklies below the 55, things look structurally normal. And also the fact that we're just backtesting the inauguration top and also backtesting a little bit of this May through June chop, that's not bad either. So let's look at the biweekly. Biweekly is looking totally fine. Let me look at the EMAs on the weekly though. Okay, so this is good to see too. Rejection. One second. So yeah, we've had this return back to the 21 weekly EMA. This is quite normal to see. Also, it's even totally normal to see a retest of the 34 EMA on the weekly. That sits at around 102K for Bitcoin. We don't need to do that, but that's something we've seen plenty of times. Another thing to mention about the weekly chart is we have all the EMAs in a bullish posture right now. So we have the 13 above the 21 above the 34. That's not awful to see. Here on the daily though, we've seen this band flip where we have the 34 above the 21 above the 13. That right there is a sign that we are now in a more quote unquote bearish energy locally, but nothing to get super worried about until we start breaking our horizontal levels, start actually breaking below support. So we have these 200s right over here at 102K and 105K, which are in alignment with the June 22nd lows. This is something that I talked about in a recent market update, so just keep that in mind regarding what we're seeing right now with the Bitcoin chart. So if we were to effectively have a drop lower, let's just say some sort of like flash correction, I think that we would backtest these 200s, in my opinion. It's not something, that's an absolute necessity, and it's not a clean level where we're always just perfectly hitting and then somehow we immediately bounce, because you can see that we would have flashes lower than it. So if they really wanted to scare out the market maker, a retest of 100K or like 98K, that would really do it. And that would absolutely lead to a sentiment reset. And I talked about this in the last update as well. So we're at 111K right now, though. So things are looking pretty good, in my opinion. And also, we have to quickly look at the CME futures chart, which we closed off at around 112K on the CME futures. That's around where Bitcoin's trading at today. And if I was to turn off all of these moving averages, you'll see that we have quite a gap to the upside, around 114 through 117K. Bitcoin's around 112 on the CME chart. So we have a move up to consider. And I already drew this all out for you guys, like how it could all go energetically, where you see moving up into around Rosh Hashanah, maybe a little bit of a pullback into the first couple days of October, and then holding structure generally and pushing higher into the end of October, where it would be likely to see a new all-time high for Bitcoin around the next, let me show you the date, around the next October new moon, somewhere between the third quarter and October new moon. And the 22nd of October would definitely make sense for a new price discovery date. As we've been seeing, the 22nd of the month has been playing a pivotal role here for Bitcoin. But we had Eclipse season in August, so we knew that would be wild and wacky. Now we have to push through this Eclipse season locally, and then we'll have that 1 month after as your like trifecta, August, September, October. So generally looking good, because we've seen that as Bitcoin stalls out at this 100 to 115K level, as long as Bitcoin dominance is dropping, all of that goes into the alts. So we don't really need Bitcoin to go too much higher at this point. Even 130K is enough. But then having Bitcoin dominance break down deeper, that's what we want. So we're seeing right here, Bitcoin dominance has now made it to the 618 fib, and the next level of consideration would be around 55%, which is in alignment with that high, what was holding as a support after we got above it, and what we launched from, and then had this kind of shakeout back test at the same level in the end of last year, before pushing up to what is so far our total, our highest Bitcoin dominance of this cycle, around 66%. So I think 54.8% is a very important level for us to see on the downside. And I suspect that would make sense to happen probably by the end of October into November. That's when I suspect that could be achieved. Because in general, I think if we have very positive outcome with the FOMC, it's going to still be the Bitcoin show for a little bit longer. Although, if Bitcoin goes up, we're going to see all the other alts go up too. So, good news, right? Good news in general. Now let's quickly check in with Ethereum and XRP, and then we will head into our other altcoins. So we have here on the weekly chart, Ethereum now seeing a very similar rejection to the way that we were trading over here at the retest of the all-time highs back in 2021. You see, when we made it up to retesting the prior cycle high, we had a bunch of chop. It wasn't just this clean breakout. You can see right here, this was like a weird, very weird flash correction that I know you don't see it, but let me just show you. It was about a 30% correction during that week. Got bought back up, but then this following week, we even had an additional 5% down weekly close. Right now, let's look at where we're at from the recent high. It's about a 14% correction. Very typical for altcoins, but this is like where we're at today. Same level. And what you can see was there was an expansion moment, but during this expansion phase, we also had a crazy washout of 26%, which when you look at to the left, it was a perfect back test of the highs. So if we're to get a very positive couple weeks ahead with the FOMC drama, we could have a same setup like this, where we push up, then get slammed back down for whatever reason, something isolated to crypto, for example. And then that right there is a bear trap. Look like this. Okay. In that moment right there, all it would be is a back test of the cycle peak, just like we did here, and then pushed up. And then from that correction to that top does not last long, guys. That's a very fast move. If you look at the recovery week to the top, it's 70 days. So if this was to all be figured out within the next couple weeks, we were to start pushing higher into, like, let's just say the October full moon, and then we add 70 days, again, mid-December. It's pretty much what I've been saying in the past 4 or 5 red pills regarding Ethereum and how I see that going for the large caps. And then if we are to see it happen this way, then we would see rotation all of the end of December into the beginning of January. It would feel like the 2018 top, where you can see that's January 8th. This is January 1st. Let me show you how much Ethereum went up in that time frame. Doesn't seem like much, but from Christmas to there, just a couple of weeks, went up 100%. That'd be massive to see an additional 100% move in just the final couple of weeks for some of our altcoins. For example, if we were to see XRP, which I'll get to now, if we were to see XRP break into price discovery in the end of October and hit like $4.50, and then get that till November, December, have the full move along with Ethereum, let's just say getting to like $8, and then we were to have a little bit of a correction down to like 6, from 6 plus an additional 100% gets you back almost up to that $14 level that I was telling you about. And I think that's absolutely in the cards for this cycle with XRP. So now that we're looking at it, let's see what's going on. You can see the prior all-time high over here. We are back just struggling with this $3.30 level. Wild. We need to break through that level. It's obvious. And we have this kind of precarious, $3 zone that we've been now getting 273 days dealing with. This for XRP is not normal to actually trade into very bullish territory and hold up for so long. So that's a very positive thing to hear, because we've seen it do this chop at lows for very long periods of time, but seeing it at higher levels for as long as we've been seeing it, almost 300 days, is something we actually haven't seen on the charts since over here in 2017, where we had a breakout and then we had this arduous chop, major correction inside of it, and then finally a full release. We go to the 3-day chart, you'll be able to see the whole thing. So over here, effectively, that's what this feels like. It feels like we're in this moment. And I would have a hard time anticipating this is the thing that we're about to do, and then we're going to have 2 impulses. That doesn't seem so likely with the timing of things, unless something magical happens. I think we're here. And when we get this release, it's going to be very rapid. It's probably going to be only about 28 days or so. So like 4 weeks of expansion. And I'm not just pulling that number out of nowhere. I'll show you what I mean by this. So if we take 28 days going back off of this local top here, look at where it brings you. It brings you to December 8th. So from December 8th for 28 days, XRP went up 1,500%. Okay, now let's try this over here. Let's go back 28 days. How would you look at that? Pretty much right here at this peak. So for 28 days, XRP went up for 1,200%. Of course, this is the past, but I'm just showing you how that expansion phase goes. So we have that one expansion phase, we have that other expansion phase. Let's find a couple other examples. So let's see over here. We have from the top of our last cycle, crazy, right here, 28 days. That was where a majority of the gains were at the end anyways. 330%, that was our peak. We went into a bear market, and then we have our recent expansion, which if we were to call it from right there, look at that shit. 28 days on the nose, we see that expansion. 500%. And of course, we did effectively go higher, but the point is that a majority of the gains are happening in that 4 week time horizon. So for the people that are getting impatient with XRP, this is like the worst project to get impatient with because it does this where it'll go really fucking boring and then out of nowhere it's 4 weeks of glory. And a lot of the people that, don't do so well with this project are because they get bored or worried or just whatever's going on. Influencers out there saying things that, are shaking them out. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about other analysts because there's probably many, many great analysts that you all listen to. Many probably much better than me. I'll admit that. I'm not here to be the best at TA or anything. I'm just here to share my truth, right? So with that being said, I'm just trying to let people know from like kind of like Uncle Waters vibe is don't get shaken out of this thing before we have those 4 weeks of massive gains because I believe it gets very boring every time right before XRP does that. It's pretty much the vibe. Now, last thing to say about XRP before we move into the other altcoins is look at this thing that we did in July, August into September of 2024. So we have over here July top, over here July top, shakeout, recovery, sideways. We made it to about September 6th, which by the way, yesterday was September 6th. Then we had a little bit of an impulse up into the end of September. It's very possible we do this too. Then another shakeout though. This is some fuckery, okay? But what did I tell you when I was showing you the Bitcoin CME chart? Take note how this comes down into the first week of October. I'm not saying it's going to go perfectly this way. I'm sharing how it could go. And you see this shakeout right here, how I'm showing you we go up into the end of the month, a little bit of a correction into the beginning of October, and then we expand. That right there, that little shakeout, depending on where Bitcoin dominance is, that could definitely make some alts have to deal with some pain. So it could be something like that for XRP, unfortunately. But then again, you have to think, how much is 28 days? How much is 28 days in the grand scheme of things? Funny enough, XRP is at $2.80 right now. But if we take that for what it is and we were to look from October 2nd, if we were to get that shakeout and then a bottom there, plus 28 days, you're looking at the whole month of October. It could be a straight line breakout. I don't know if it'll be October or if it'll be November or December. The reason why I'm not going to spend too much calories on telling anyone like what I feel is because we've already done that in the past. And until Bitcoin dominance shows me signs that we're ready to have expansion in the alts, there's no point of going down that road again. I've miscalculated on when I anticipated XRP to have the final blow off. I was on the money with the whole move that we had over here from November. But the recent move, absolutely inaccurate. But at the end of the day, it's still been a very, very profitable play to have bought most of the XRP down here, which is what we did. And I have yet to sell. So whatever was going on until today, it's still up quite a bit. I'm not discouraged about that, especially since it's my biggest holding. So we will continue to track the XRP move as we go. I'm still overall anticipating this move to be concluded within the year of 2025, but I want to see how this Eclipse season goes before making any calls on this. Generally though, I still think $10 plus XRP is happening this cycle. So that's what matters most to me. Now we're shifting over to XPR. Okay. I believe we've covered this one before. What is up? All right. Oof. So first things first, a couple good things to mention. Major parallel channel. Let me just check my audio. Should probably take a quick sip of water. 1 second. All right. Okay. We should be sounding great. All right. We have this major parallel channel, descending parallel channel, and wow, what a move that we've had recently. If you look at the June 22nd lows, this thing has popped back up to effectively where it was stalled out around Trump's inauguration. So this is looking pretty good locally. Definitely been dealing with some pressure as of the last couple of weeks though. It's down about 30% from these local highs that we got last month. So seeing a bullish energy in Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as Binance was not shocking for us. This was something we've been talking about for a while. The overall thesis was that we would be up before the second lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, and then we would correct likely around eclipse season, which is a typical thing we see all the time. That's what we're getting. And that's also seemingly the case for XPR. So that's cool to see that we've, in the grand scheme of things, since 2022, pretty much hit our highs in the month of August. Now, if you bought the bear market, which unfortunately lasted quite a while until summer of last year, doing pretty good on this play, up as much as about XRP is up, all things considered. And the one big development that looks really nice on this chart is the fact that we've finally broken above this parallel channel, which has an initial touch point, a clear secondary touch point, another clear rejection, because you can see from here, what was this? Probably like a 50%, yep, even more, 65% correction. Bear trap, because it was a back test of the 382 fib. This is something that I teach. It's a perfect retest, actually. That's kind of where you want to buy back in after you have automatic rallies, which I do want to call this an automatic rally because of the speed and how quickly it accelerated into this golden pocket. It's good enough because a typical AR or automatic reaction is around the 0.5 fib. Then you get your back test to the 382, clean, pop above, and now you're on the outside of this parallel channel, right at the 0.5 fib. I like to see this. So this looks very good for me, in my opinion. For more continuation. And I would say that just keep the 888 fib in mind, or 3 cents if you want to make it nice and simple. So around 3 cents is where things can get weird because we don't have too much data above 3 cents. You see right here was a pump and dump week. This was all pump and dump weeks, and this was obviously cycle peak, pump and dump. And since the bear market, we have yet to revisit that 3 cent level right here. This was a major spike up, rejection perfectly at 3 cents, another major correction. We haven't been spending too much time above 3 cents. So XPR, keep 3 cents on your mind for potential de-risking. And what I mean by de-risking is you are removing your risk. So any initial investment you made, for example, if you put $500 in XPR all the way down here, and we're now making it all the way up here to like even 1 penny, you are up 1,000 fucking %. So you would want to maybe get your $500 back, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So there's a method to the madness here, because if you just always bank on having price discovery to the upside, that could be dangerous for an investment thesis. And I would say be careful with that. So generally, if you were to put about $500 in at whatever, what is this, 001, you're getting about 500,000 tokens. And if you were to sell them at about, well, we want to sell to get back about $500. Out of this at around, like, we'll call it a penny. You're looking at about 50,000 tokens minus your 500,000. It's pretty simple math. You're still left with 450,000 tokens. And that 450,000 tokens you still have, you can now potentially be selling them somewhere in this 4 cent level. So if you were to sell that at 0.04, you would have all of your $500 back, and you would have also turned in that 500 that you started with minus the original tokens to get back your 500, and you would have made $18,000. And you didn't even need price discovery. You're just selling it within ranges that we've hit before. So you made 18,000, you're getting taxed on, the 1750 or whatever, and it's a pretty nice play, man, to turn 500 into over 15K. So this is a massive opportunity when you look at it from this perspective. I love talking about de-risking because it helps a lot of people understand to be a little bit more mature and sophisticated with their investments, because again, the hardest part about navigating this market is when your money is on the line. So if you're going to see something go up 800% or 900% or 1,000%, there's nothing wrong with getting your initial investment back so that you remove your chips from the gambling casino. Think about life this way when you invest, especially in crypto. Thank me later. Because again, if you were to see an asset go up 800 or 900%, you're to remove back to get your initial, you're up so much that you're keeping most of your tokens. Don't get greedy, because you'll also see how the tokens that are already available, that you're not getting rid of, and how you only need a little bit higher regarding these fibs, you can make insane gains and still play it safe and be on the right side of the trade. This is how I always teach my clients. So I really like the setup with this descending parallel channel and the way that we've been recovering since this major low this major low pivot back on the lunar eclipse of October 2023. And since it's been a nice recovery, but lots of volatility, lots of chop along the way, this looks like we're very close to an expansion phase with the technical setup. All right, so now that we spent so long on XPR, let's use some of that information for the rest of today's reviews. Oof. All right, this will be a first for us here. Ardor, it's ticker symbol ARDR. First time review. We're looking at the weekly chart. This is definitely quite a bit of data to consider. We have going all the way back to October, even July of 2016. So we're gonna load up a daily chart. Okay, we got to go to a 3-day. We're going to see a couple things. One, it's been pretty much locked in a sideways trading range since May of 2022. It's not the best thing to see. You have your major peak back in January 2018. This is very reminiscent of like the Bitcoin Cash chart, I believe, where you can see a major top in January, a lower high in April of 2021 during that alt season, and then generally like not so much going on when you're comparing prior highs. No offense to Bitcoin Cash, I'm just giving you a visual example of like a similar chart. So here you have your C19 crash, and if you were to have bought that crash on this particular project, you'd be up right now like 118%, which of course from stock market terms, that's pretty decent, I guess. Even though if you bought like Meta, or well, it wasn't Meta back then, but if you bought Facebook back then, if you bought Tesla, if you bought even like American Express stock, if you bought Nvidia, you know, if you bought Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, if you bought any of that shit, you'd be up way more than what you're dealing with this thing. Also, if you bought Bitcoin, you'd even be up more. If you bought the top of Bitcoin over here, when this thing was at $2, Bitcoin was at $19,000. So whilst this thing is down 96% from that moment, maybe it's because it's dilution. I'm not sure, nor do I really care too much because I don't think it's super important. But yeah, I know a lot of people are going to get triggered by that. But generally, we're looking at since 2022 and we're not seeing any expansion. It's just chop, chop, chop. So this again is why I feel confident saying what I just said before. But anyways, the point that I'm making here is that if you bought Bitcoin at 20K at the top of 2018, Bitcoin today is 111K. Whilst this thing is down 95%, Bitcoin is up at $111,000, right? So these are things that you want to consider when you're making investments, because you need to be cautious with how much you would want to put in your portfolio. This thing I would never want to put in my portfolio because of the way that I'm seeing it's performing. The only way I would, though, is if it was venture capital at like 1% of my overall allocation. So like we're talking about putting a very, very small amount, and we'll see what it could possibly do. But if it's to retest the April alt season highs, it's an 800% move. If it's to retest the anywhere near the prior cycle, you're looking at about a 2000% gain, which does fall in alignment with my venture capital plays. And that's why I wouldn't mind making a venture capital play in this. Although the reason I won't be is because I have enough venture capital plays and I think there's better plays, especially locally. This thing is chopping around and it's not doing anything. So this is kind of the venture capital stuff we get stuck with, and we end up waiting and waiting and waiting till there's an eventual alt season. And you can see from the exact level we're trading at right now to when this last alt season happened, in about 2 months, it went up almost 800%. So that could happen again, right? And that might be worth it for you. I'm not sure, but I'd be cautious if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of money and you're just kind of getting new to this market. This is the type of stuff that I would avoid. I'd be very, very careful because this chop can get worse and it could even go lower. given the fact that there's no need for stuff like this to go up just because of an alt season. What I mean by that is if you look back at the last cycle, we had things like Stellar Lumens not experience full price discovery expansion while we were seeing everything else for the most part. So it was being held down in the conversation of XRP and Ripple dealing with that SEC lawsuit. There's no reason XLM should have been down. So there's times where things are just in the wrong part of the conversation. And because it's only retail investors dealing with stuff like this, Ardor, that's what you have to deal with. So let's move on. We have audio, another great example of a project that hasn't done much whilst Bitcoin and Ethereum and other things have been pushing higher. I actually used to hold this thing and I sold it at a loss in March of 2025, earlier this year. I sold it at around 8 cents on March 18th. That was my last big sell of a bunch of speculative venture capital stuff that I added to my portfolio that I've since noticed, well, that was a bad investment. And then I corrected course. I refined. And this is something everyone should do. You're never going to always hit home runs in this game, right? So you need to be honest with yourself and say, well, if I got into a bad investment, I have to get out of it and I have to reposition myself, because at the end of the day, the only person who saves you is you. The only person who earns your money is you. The only person who can do these moves with your portfolio is you, not me. All right. I am just here to be the cup of coffee in the morning. And I've said this a million times. So I could admit when I make a bad investment, I will get out of it and I will add more to stuff that I'm more confident in, or I just won't add at all. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, this was venture capital. This was maybe 1% of my portfolio. It might have even been 0.7% of my overall portfolio. So when I got rid of it, it barely felt like a bruise. It didn't matter to me. All right. And this, when I talked about it initially, I'm sure I also called it venture capital. I would never put large amounts of money into speculative stuff like this unless I'm very, very confident, or if we're in a bear, like if we're in the midst of a bear market, right? Which we only really call it based off of what Bitcoin's doing here in crypto. Now, this thing has just topped back in March 2021. It's been perpetually down since. And sure, we can talk about this trend line that it's sort of backtesting and over and over and over again. But I mean, shit, this could keep going on until it's in Hades. And I've seen some big problems in this chart. It's made me want to avoid holding it. And now that we're here and we've dropped even lower since I've sold, if you're somebody who's holding this, I mean, it should be venture capital, first of all. And if it is, there's nothing wrong with waiting to see how alt season could go, because we have a lot of liquidity we could recover all the way up to here around 40 to 42 cents. So why do I isolate that particular level? Well, because it's the chop here before the alt season we had in 2021. It's the level we returned back to in the kind of beginning of the bear market of 2022. We got below that level and started getting rejected quite a bit around that 42 cent level. Here we had a deeper correction, but then magnetized right back up to it a couple times, went lower again, and then did the same thing. And then since effectively March 2024, that was the last time we made it to 40 cents, and we've keeled over. So I think we have a lot to consider for this 40 cent level. And shit, if you're already at this place right now, what could this be? A 400% gain for you? And also consider that this 618, we have thin air between that 42 cent level and this and the 70 cent level. So we're talking about 1,000%, and that's nothing for an alt season move. So if you're discouraged and you're hearing how I sold this and whatever, which by the way, I sent out an update to everybody that I sold this. This is not like a secret. But yeah, if you're discouraged and you're like, well, Water sold it and I'm still holding this shit coin, what should I do? You know, just look at everything like it's sort of a shit coin. In an alt season, the most nonsense projects do very, very well. These were never long-term holds to begin with. You play the cycles and you speculate and you gamble accordingly, right? But it's a lot smarter to gamble with 1% of your portfolio or 2% max than it would be with 25% of your portfolio. So again, if you start losing a couple hands at the poker table, it's best to just walk away. But that's not to say that what could be ahead of us, which is quite different from playing poker, is just the waiting game. of holding tokens that could eventually go up very high based on just Bitcoin and Ethereum and stablecoin dominance doing their thing. So hopefully that helps people not be discouraged, but to see things for where they're at. We have a bit ahead of us to 40 cents, and then the swipe between 40 cents to 70 cents could happen very rapidly, and that's still on the cards for this project audio. Let's go to Velo. Ooh, also very nice parallel channel that we've been trading in. I'm going to zoom in. Very cool. Okay, so this has been holding this parallel channel since the bear market bottom in December 2022. Holding higher lows, and now we're back there. And we're back there at a very weird level where it's around the prior peak. So this is cool to see that we had this peak of February 2023. This would be like an automatic rally. And since we've had a couple of what we would call SOSs, signs of strength, and LPSs, or last point of support or last point of supply, like a supply test after a major impulse to the upside. So we've seen a major impulse, and another major impulse. And since we've been holding higher low structure as well. And now we're right around the range of this initial impulse, which, by the way, if you zoom out, you'll see our bear market brought us straight in a crazy straight line down. Like, this is a devastating bear market for this project. Because, I mean, it was spending quite a bit of time here. And even from this level, it's still down 97% from here, dude. This is not good. So if you bought this thing in the last cycle, it's kind of fucked up. But if you got interested in the year of 2023, then maybe not so bad. But to be completely honest, this is a really bad chart to see this type of move, where it's on a perpetual sell-off to the downside for 770 days, losing 99.9% of its value. Yeah. So, but anyways, as we look at what we're dealing with today and the pivot that it's made since the end of 2022 into 2023, I like this structure that it's forming. And now all I want to see is it break above the 4 cent level. So if it could break above the 4 cent level, I think we have a lot of room to go to 30 cents. And perhaps 30 cents is as good as it gets for right now. And shit, guys, that's a 2,200% move. So just consider this, that if we swipe through all of this liquidity to begin with, we're kind of there at the moment where we can go from here to this 1618 fib and then break above 7 cents. I think we would clear straight to 30, and then around 30 cents I have a hard time entertaining more. But this shit is something that I would put as a venture capital play in my portfolio, not because the chart looks good, but again, 1 to 2%, we have a lot of upside potential. And at least it's showing a higher low structure, as opposed to the last chart we were looking at was going down, like it was reverse, right? The audio chart looked like this, right? Then the other chart before that, Ardor, looked like this, sideways. Well, here we're looking at the Velo chart, which is looking like this. It's moving up. It's structurally looking a lot better. So again, just my technical opinion, out of the 3 charts that we've looked, or those past 2 charts that we looked at, this looks pretty good to me, in my opinion. Maybe very similar to Proton in that way. But yeah, this could be a cool move up in the alt season, just because of what we've seen it deal with, this devastating bear market. It might be similar to this play Onyx Coin, where I'll show you real quick. You see this? Like, absolute bloodbath bear market, where it effectively, from this cluster, it lost 99% of its value. And then out of nowhere, it just popped up. And when it popped up, it cleared all of this liquidity. And where the hell did it go? It went right there to the level around launch and around where it broke down. So when I look at the Velo chart, where would that be? It would be the same. It would be right around this blue line at 30 cents. It's where we got above, came back to, and then broke down. The same shit could happen with Velo. And by the way, the Onyx coin even went higher. It would have like technically maybe went compare it to like 40 or 50 cents. So that's like a 3,000% play. That would be massive. So keep that in mind. Where are you guys investing in Velo? Is this like a you get it on Coinbase wallet type thing, or a KuCoin, or let me know. All right, we have to wrap this up. We have the Shiba Inu chart. Last chart of the day, we have been holding on to this 236 for dear life. We have all-time high back in October 2021. We have a swipe up through the 702 back in March of last year. Another rejection at the 618. This is your automatic rally. This is kind of like your spring vibe, where this would be your selling climax. And after your spring, well, now we're kind of in a test, in my opinion. And after your test, which is also in alignment with the 236, you'd have an SOS. So an SOS would be signaled by macro candle closures above the 702 fib. So we would call it when we can get above this level right here. That's an SOS, and it would look something like this, because typically an SOS has a backup phase, and then we push higher into price discovery. And it's very typical. You have to deal with this 888 fib on a backup test. So it could look like something like that, where like we see this initial, by the way, it's not that I'm not trying to give you the timing of things. It could be more like this. Into like late November, early December, then Bitcoin has a weird correction, and then we have that final impulse. We had that backup phase over here. Major move up, backup, final peak. And remember, all of Bitcoin dominance started to really bottom out around here. So then Bitcoin had a major correction of about 55%. This had a major correction too, and then it went up for one final impulse into October 2021. That could be the same sort of play. It's just the difference is this was a brand new launch right here. It was like literally just launched and it went up 1,000,000% or some crazy shit like that. Lately, it's been chopping sideways. So I suspect if we're gonna do a move like this, like the one that I painted for you over here, that it's gonna be much more rapid. It's not gonna be this long-winded. I mean, if anything, we're sort of in the process of completing something like this now, in my opinion. So keep that in mind for the energy. And we have these targets up here for SHIB at around 0, whatever, 1.3. So where we're at right now, I don't suspect we're going to have much higher for all-time highs, but that's still at 1,000% move. I don't even know if that's possible, but this would be very much like how the last cycle went for a lot of projects that were just barely breaking into price discovery. And that would be like Cardano, I think, is a great example. Let me quickly show you on the Cardano chart the similar type of play. So we have here the prior cycle peak in 2018. Then we have the slightly new all-time high back test. And if we think all things considered, we went up an additional 130%. Well, if we look at the SHIB chart and we are to go up 130%, it would bring you to around where I have this line, 002. So think about it that way. It's definitely possible for it to go a little bit higher, but that's still pretty crazy. I'm not entertaining the 1618 at this time. We already had that type of memery in the past. I don't know if we have it in us again, but consider that move for price discovery from here to there. That would be very common, actually. Cardano wasn't the only play to do that. Many other coins did that too. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you. What a freaking month it's been, from the beginning of August last month to the beginning of September here. We've now officially kicked off our Eclipse season. So I really hope you guys have taken a lot of notes today, because we covered so much, especially in today's decode. We have today and tomorrow this blood moon total lunar eclipse. As you can see over here, it says 41 minutes till countdown time. And I'm definitely just going to be chilling for the rest of the night, spending my time trying to avoid any of this chaos that could occur on the world stage, because of course we have crypto, but we also have all the stuff that's happening in the world. Just staying centered. I definitely advise you all do the same. A lot can happen in eclipse season, especially a total lunar eclipse, a blood moon eclipse. So just stay centered. You have our community here. You could chat and chill with us whenever you want. Again, shout out to our community. I can't believe we made it this far. It's wild. Appreciate every single one of you, and I will be catching you all very soon in a midweek market update. I'll definitely be sending out another update maybe in a couple days, depending on how this market reacts to the upcoming weekly open. For the traditional markets, with gold pushing into price discovery and the Russell looking the way it is, I think this is a spicy week ahead. So appreciate every single one of you, and I'll catch you all very soon. Much love.